братишка. Give me your money. What? Are you trying to rob me? No, I'm not robbing you. Now give me your money. Why? They were always mine. Now give them to me. Your underwear too. This is ridiculous. Ouch! Why did you do that? I did nothing. You did it to yourself. Ow! God damn it! Stop it! Stop what? Hey, mate! Here! Grab the gun! Сука! My balls! You Nazi! You too! Everybody wants to kill me!
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and welcome to Overtime. Let me, before we do anything else, that audio has kicked in. We're listening to last night's fireplace again, so I'm going to turn the fireplace off, and we'll be good to go. So thank you all for joining us. Before we begin, unfortunately, we've been notified by Operator Starsky that he will not be able to make it today. He is well, he's doing fine, but he does have other obligations that conflict, so he will not be joining us. 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐴NDRING was supposed to join us, but it looks like he will not be able to make it either. And Commander McMillan almost didn't make it, but is fortunately here, so it looks like we will be able to do a bit of an update. Commander, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure. Glad to be here.
So we did miss you yesterday on downtime, but 𝐒𝐤𝐬𝐴NDRING and I had a good time doing that. It's been a while since it was just him and I, so that was good.
I was braving the airport.
Real life. Hate it when it rears its ugly head. So what's going on in Ukraine?
Well, the big thing that's making most of the news right now is the fighting going around Bakhmut, and to the north of it, a small town called Soledar. We've talked about Bakhmut before, so we'll get to that in a sec, but let's focus on Soledar. Soledar itself is kind of trivial and unimportant. It really has nothing to be a significant issue about what's going on in the fighting right now. The problem is if the Russians take it, and depending on which source you've consulted at the moment, it's either still parts of it are in Ukrainian hands, the Russians have taken the whole thing, or the Ukrainians have abandoned it and the Russians are still slowly moving in. It's up in the air. Suffice to say that the situation in the town is such that I think the Ukrainians are going to be forced to pull out, or they're going to have to mount a significant counterattack with forces that I don't think they have in the area, or leave their troops who are in Soledar there to defend it, and probably they get encircled, cut off, and eventually annihilated. Why is Soledar important? Because once the Russians secure it, it opens up another avenue of approach. It effectively encircles Bakhmut to the extent that the only roads into and out of Bakhmut are now in a position to be under fire by the by the Russian forces. So it makes it very difficult for the Ukrainians to continue to reinforce and resupply their troops in Bakhmut. So if Soledar falls, Bakhmut probably will fall within the next week or two after it. I think that's the key situation that is happening right now. Until and unless the Ukrainians mount a significant counterattack, I think this is going to be a cascading series of dominoes.
All right. So now one of the things about that town as well is that my understanding is it's got a lot of underground tunnels, salt mines, and
Yeah,
reasonably
yeah.
well insulated from counterattack by the
Right.
Ukrainians.
The primary industry in Soledar is a salt mine, an underground salt mine. There have been photos that some people believe suggest that the Russians have secured those salt mines. There are pictures of Wagnerite troops standing inside a cave, and then other people have shown that no, here is what the actual Soledar salt mine looks like. Here's the cave, or the picture of the Wagnerite standing in a cave, and here is a picture of some caves that are nearby, like 15 kilometers or something north of Soledar, that are not in Soledar itself. So it's a stage propaganda photo. I don't think that it makes a whole lot of difference if you go and hole up in the caves and the upper surface is secured. You're stuck in the salt mines or the caves, and you're going to be starved out regardless. So whether there's fighting going on in the salt mines or not, I can't say. I don't think it makes any sense for the Ukrainians to contest the salt mines themselves.
Well, but my understanding was that it was possible that you could store a good deal of ammunition in the salt mines, and the Ukrainians have been very effective at hitting ammo and supply depots, but that Soledar may be insulated against that, and that could be a concern as well.
Yeah, to some extent that's true. If they do secure the town and decide to use it as a munitions storage location or logistics storage facility, then it protects whatever is being stored in it from Ukrainian artillery or HIMARS strikes. The problem is that there aren't a lot of roads into and out of Soledar, so it's not a particularly good location to turn into a logistics hub. So if you do decide to use it as a storage facility, you're actually slowing things down, because now you have to go to the underground facility, load up your truck, drive to the crossroads, which presumably would be Bakhmut once Bakhmut is taken, and then you can resupply forces. Additionally, the salt mine itself isn't, how to put this, it's not constructed in a way that makes it conducive to being able to load and unload supplies into it. You basically have one truck going in or out at a time. So, it creates its own bottleneck, if you will.
It wasn't made for supplying and distributing ammo, weapons, and other military supplies. Is what you're saying.
So you could use it as a local facility for whatever troops you have in and around Soledar itself. They could easily use that as a storage facility to resupply themselves, but it really doesn't make sense if you're trying to use it as a logistical hub to support some big offensive drive to the nearby towns.
What happens if Bakhmut falls, do you think?
We've asked Starsky this before, and if you look at the map, there are two roads that lead further into Ukraine. Assuming the Russians take Bakhmut, they can either go to the northwest or the southwest. To the southwest doesn't really do much. There are no major towns. To the northwest, there are two towns. If you give me a moment, I can look up the names, but I don't have them off the top of my head right now. I posted the name somewhere. I was discussing this. Whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're two moderately important cities to the northwest of Bakhmut. If you secure Bakhmut, then you can make an offensive drive up the highway that goes in the direction of those two towns. That's what it does. But in terms of being able to use it immediately, you're not seeing a collapse of the Ukrainian forces defending in this area. They're being driven slowly back and slowly out. I mean, I want to remind the audience, the battle for Bakhmut has been going on for close to 6 months now. It's not as if taking it is then suddenly going to, as we saw happen in the north around Kharkiv, you're not going to see a collapse of the Ukrainian defenses and then suddenly the Russians are going to erupt through gaps in the front lines and take great swaths of territory. There's no sign that that's about to happen. So Bakhmut is important, yes, but it's not going to be a critical change in this overall strategic situation.
Well, obviously, sir, you don't read Pravda.
Well, yeah. and the word does define itself as truth. So
Yeah.
anything that I say that contradicts them is obviously wrong.
We have a sticker. It's 50 DKK. I'm probably going to butcher this name, but I'm going to do my best. Bjorn Hartmare, thank you so much for that. Starsky is not with us, but all of these Starsky updates, the donations are going to the Vetra Volunteer Organization that was chosen by Starsky. All super chat stickers, any donations that we get, any monetization we get is going to that organization. He had several organizations in mind. He chose that one because that one actually is more directly affecting his brigade. It's a smaller one, but it knows his brigade and has been supplying his brigade with needed supplies. So that is where all of these super chats go. So thank you so much. You can only super chat on In Time. We are moving all of our news to Overtime. Overtime is still a smaller channel. It is not yet monetized. So anyone who could go to that channel and subscribe would really help us out in getting that channel fully set up. And then once we have the two channels, it makes it easier for you to decide what content you would like to see, either the interviews, which will be on In Time, or the news, which will be on Overtime, or both. But until it's set up, we kind of got to do this wonky thing. So thank you for bearing with us, and thank you for bearing with the Restream bot, which is notifying everybody of what's going on in the cross channels. It's a little clunky, but it's nice to be able to have the channels communicate with each other. So what else is going on, Commander?
Well, the only other significant thing in terms of activity in and around the front is we have still got attritional warfare, slow grinding stuff going on up in the north around Kharkiv and also down in the south around the Kherson bridgehead. There has been some speculation. I'm not sure I entirely agree with it, but some speculation that the Ukrainians may be getting ready to do something offensive down in the south to try to cut off the land communications between the Russian enclave near the Kherson area and Crimea, possibly by attacking out of 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐴 towards either Metropole or Mariupol. That would then set up an avenue for them to try to retake the entire Crimea. I don't know if that offensive is actually going to develop or whether it's kind of a deception operation for something else that they're planning to do in a different location. That's hard to say. We also know that the Russian, commander of the Russian forces, ground forces, has been relieved of command. I don't think they announced yet who his replacement was. But that again is an indication of how dissatisfied Putin and his inner circle are with the way the Russian army has been performing in the south. We know that the head of the Wagner group, whose name keeps escaping me, Przor, you know what it is. I don't. I'm sorry. I'm not good with
too. Yeah,
the
that's
names.
all right.
Yeah. Anyway, there has been some speculation that he is trying to set himself up to be nominated as the commander of all Russian ground forces, not commander of the Russian army, but the whole ground force operation in the campaign against Ukraine. I suspect that Putin will not do this because it puts far too much military strength in the hands of one guy who has started to make noises about being critical of Putin himself, and that's laying the foundation for a coup. So I doubt that will happen, but we kind of know he's been campaigning for something of that nature.
Oh, and he's a mercenary. Do you really want to put your
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I have my own private army, which is pretty damn powerful, and now you've given me command of all of the best Russian ground forces in the area. Who the hell's going to stop me if I want to take Moscow?
Yeah, it's that's an interesting. That would be interesting if it happened. All right.
Yeah, as I've said a couple times, at this point in the war, the fighting that matters is not the fighting on the ground in Ukraine itself. It's the fighting that's going on behind closed doors in smoky rooms in the Kremlin. It's all about who is going to eventually replace Putin as the leader. I'm not saying that they're actively getting ready to do that, but I think a lot of factions are saying, look, this from a economic standpoint, and I don't mean economic in terms of its impact on Russia, but economic in terms of its impact on the hierarchy, the oligarchy in Russia, who's losing them money because he's waging this war that they're not winning, and he can't find a way out because the moment he starts backing down, they're going to say, okay, we're done with you, and he goes away. So that's why Putin keeps fighting, and that's why the other people are all quietly maneuvering behind him, but they don't want to jump too early, because if they do, their heads end up on spikes on the Kremlin walls.
The first man problem, the whoever is the first one to actually move.
When you breach the door, the guy who goes through the door first is the most exposed.
Yeah. So I want to wrap this up because I know you're busy, but we did have some concerns in the live chat, and so I want to do my best to try to frame this and think about this. It does look like Ukraine is poised to lose some area, some territory. They've made some significant gains in recapturing territory. But you had also mentioned that they may be doing some kind of counteroffensive. Now, the last counteroffensive that we saw appeared to take 6 months for them to plan, and they took some losses before that counteroffensive. They moved troops that could have been used somewhere else in order to do that counteroffensive, which was wildly successful. And they appear to be very patient, and they appear to really be planning this well. So can we at least be cautiously optimistic that any losses here are probably reasonably short-term, and that they may be planning something else and are willing to take these losses in order to do something in the coming months ahead?
In any war, you want to defend what you currently have. So that's what they're doing, like in this battle around Bakhmut. They're trying to hold on to their precious homeland territory. That makes sense. But the corollary is that you do not win wars defensively. You have to be offensive to win the war. You have to go out, crush the enemy's forces, take the ground they have. So the issue is the Ukrainians staging for an offensive. They have to find a place that the Russians are weak, where they can achieve dramatic gains, where they can potentially encircle and destroy significant Russian forces. You can't do that on the fly. We've seen the Russians try to do that on the fly, and every time they do, like the opening drive on Kiev, or Kyiv, is a perfect example in point. They launched with almost, no planning, maybe a couple weeks worth of planning of staging the forces and getting them in position, and then throwing this drive that wasn't planned. You saw the roads get jammed up with their logistic train being unable to move, and the Ukrainians just massacred them. That's an example of an offensive operation that fails, and arguably most of the Russian offensive operations in the war thus far have been failures. And the Ukrainians don't have a huge material or numerical superiority, so they're very careful about husbanding the forces they have, their offensive forces, and using them only where it achieves a decisive result. And we've seen that both up in Kharkiv and in the south in the Kherson region, where they reclaimed that entire section of where the Russians had crossed the river. I think that's what they're doing right now. And the add-on to that is we're now seeing a number of European and U.S. countries, and European countries and the U.S. talking about giving significant upgrades for equipment for the Ukrainian ground forces. So we recently saw announcements of the U.S. giving 50 M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, the Germans giving them 40 Marder infantry fighting vehicles, the French giving them an unspecified number of AMX 10 heavy armored cars. Now we're seeing things like the Poles giving them Leopard 2 tanks, the Germans seriously discussing that, the French talking about the possibility of trenching Leclerc tanks, the British giving them Challengers, the Americans potentially giving them M1 Abrams, although I think that may not be a good idea. But regardless, those are all equipment elements that add up to an offensive punch capability. And if they take the time to train their troops and establish one or two, say, really well-armed, well-trained mechanized or armored brigades that they can use as an offensive punch, they may be able to achieve a decisive result in a localized area. And I think that's kind of what's probably going on at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you for that. There was definitely some concern, and people were feeling like it was hopeless. And honestly, considering what Ukraine has managed to do, I think it's just you're going to see an ebb and flow. Any final thoughts before we go? Because I want to make sure that you're out of here.
The Russians are talking about increased mobilization. I've even heard some mumbling about full mobilization. The problem is, that puts an enormous amount of manpower into the field, but if it's untrained, it's not well equipped, not well supplied, that doesn't really accomplish much, but other than giving a lot more people to throw into the meat grinder to continue the attritional war. And depending on how you interpret the information coming out of various sources, right now it looks like the Ukrainians have somewhere between a 2 to 3 to 1 kill ratio going on it. So for every one Ukrainian casualty, they're inflicting 2, 3, possibly even, depending on some estimates, 4 or 5 losses on the Russian side. And the Russians have the manpower to do it and keep throwing those guys into the grinder. But the question is, can their society and their army from a morale perspective, sustain those kind of losses for no appreciable gains. Your lips are moving, but I can't hear anything.
I haven't muted myself in months. I'm proud of myself, but there goes my record. We got to reset the dial to 0.
Look at me! I win the competition.
yeah. So you're the only one who hasn't. Well, you can't be said to officially be on in time until you've spoken with your mic off. Some of my best soliloquies, absolute best soliloquies, have all had the mic off. You'll have to trust me that they were the best. I know you've been busy, and so I really want to thank you for joining us. I think this is important information, and you understand this better than anyone else that we have access to. So thank you so much for coming. I also, you are also on our Discord, and you often answer questions. Yep. So I wanted to thank you for that, because you're in there, and people ask what's going on, and we all get to see the responses and see the engagement. I hope you'll come and join us on the Discord. The link is in the description. You can also just find it at intimeshow.com/Discord. Come join us there. Again, please remember to join the Overtime channel. Subscribe to that. It's going to really help us out as we try to get that channel up to speed with In Time. And we look forward to a number of shows that we have planned for next week, starting with a special on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which will be Monday, 10 a.m. on In Time. Thank you, Commander, once again. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it too. Thanks for the opportunity.
And we will see you all on Monday. Thank you, and have a great weekend.